No air!
Oi, amateur.
Who doesn't know about the mischievous fifth-dimensional being in the DC universe? Yes, guys, today we're talking about Mister Mxyzptlk. This near-omnipotent trickster has powers that defy the laws of reality and physics, which he uses to create chaos instead of destruction. Today we'll be looking into the anatomy of this troublesome imp and unravel the mystery of Mxyzptlk. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Who is Mister Mxyzptlk? Created by Jerry Siegel and Ira Yarborough, this character first appeared in the 30th issue of Superman. He was introduced as Mister Mxyzptlk. As you can see, this spelling is not the one that we know him as. Well, the modern spelling we associate with him actually became popularized in the 131st volume of Superman Volume 1, which came out in 1959. This is also where we see him don his trademark orange suit and white hair. Funnily enough, Mxyzptlk is actually an alias that he adopted to introduce himself, as his real name couldn't be translated into any languages known on Earth. Unlike other villains that Superman has faced off against, this villain focuses mostly on messing with him, following the footsteps of the trickster god Loki. That's probably why fans and characters often call him Mxy Loki. Every 90 days, Mxy would return in his purple suit and balding head to tease and plague Superman. This rivalry of sorts has been happening since the golden age of comics. Apparently, Mxy was drawn to Earth at a very young age, and he met the young Justice there. This happened years after he met Superman as an adult Mxy. This young Mxy was a very good student, and he didn't believe the young Justice when they told him that he would grow up to become the prankster that Superman faced off against. Young Mxy vowed that he would never become that person, which admittedly is a very good vow to make. But this had graver consequences than anyone thought it would, as the Earth was destroyed because of this change in history. So Impulse, Robin, and Superboy decided to indoctrinate Mxy with the Three Stooges video. This turned serious student Mxy into a silly prankster, saving the world in the long run. Sadly, when Superboy eventually met the adult Mxy, he seemed like he had no recollection of this meeting. How do you pronounce Mxyzptlk? Mxy's real name is very long, and as you can guess, it's unpronounceable. Even Batmite, who's usually very patient, couldn't be bothered enough to listen to Mxy's full name. Since his name is this long, Mxy was pretty sure Superman would never be able to say or type his name backwards. In some versions, the name we know is the closest he can get to his original name, which the viewers would understand. When it comes to the pronunciation of his name, Mxy's name changes every adaptation. If you look at the earliest adaptations, Mxy's name is pronounced Mxyzptlk. In Superman the Animated Series, even Superman initially uses this pronunciation, but Mxy corrects it and it's pronounced Mxyzptlk. What does Mister Mxyzptlk look like? When it comes to Mxy's appearance, it would be a gross understatement to say that he's changed over the years. So he was first introduced in the Golden Age, Earth 2, right? Here he appeared as this bald man with a cute little purple suit. He has a purple derby hat and a green bow tie. Since he's from the fifth dimension, his technological advancements look almost magical in operation. Superman literally had to outsmart this imp every time because he couldn't even match his power. And yes, Mxy managed to outsmart the mega genius Lex Luthor at one point too. After this Golden Age version, we see Mxy in the Silver Age, Earth 1. This time, he appears a lot more futuristic. He wears his iconic orange suit with purple trim. He also has white hair on the sides of his head. In the 208th issue of Action Comics, we see the modern spelling in use. And this particular Mxy could affect Superman because Superman was susceptible to magic. If you're a DC nerd, you would know that in the 1960s, DC set up their multiverse. There they explained that the purple-suited Mxy, the one with the spelling Mxyzptlk, lives in the fifth dimension connected to Earth 2. The Mxy with the orange suit, the one whose name is spelt Mxyzptlk, lives in the fifth dimension connected to Earth 1. The Earth 1 version is also retconned into the Superboy stories as the red-haired Master Mxyzptlk. Mxyzptlk. After the Crisis on Infinite Earths arc, we get the new Earth of modern age. Mxy survived the crisis without much of a scratch, but his temperament became unpleasant, along with the nature of his pranks. In the post-crisis stories, the weakness that would send him back to his dimension kept on changing because Lex Luthor taught him how to lie. Many of the later stories have a very postmodern feel to them. A good example of this would be the 75th issue of Superman, the Man of Steel. In Earth Zero, post-Flashpoint, Mxy gets mentioned once in the 0th issue of Action Comics with his wife, Mrs. Nyxly. It was said that he was in a coma after his battle with Lord Vindictivix. Once he got out of the coma, he married Nyxly and became the king of the 5th dimension. What are Mister Mxyzptlk's powers and abilities? When it comes to Mxy, he's practically omnipotent. He can warm reality easy peasy because of his super advanced super science that works like magic. He can perform anything and everything as long as he can imagine it. He hasn't been successful at killing Superman though, so I guess he's not imaginative enough. He's a very troublesome being from another dimension. He's a dangerous foe for Superman because Superman is susceptible to magic, so Mxy can technically hurt Superman really badly. He knows about Superman's double identity, but he refuses to talk about it, as it might lower the control he has over the Man of Steel. He believes that threatening Superman with his secret is much more fun than actually revealing it. Weirdly enough, Mxy thinks of himself as Superman's friend and shows up unexpectedly to throw a surprise into his life. Mxy's a very talented guy. He can disappear and reappear instantly with just a thought. He even teleported Bizarre from his planet to Earth by simply snapping his fingers, proving just how strong his powers are. Since he is a bit of a prankster, I think the one power that suits him the most is his ability to gesturify. This ability effectively helps Mxy manipulate logic and the fundamentals of reality based on a whim. He can create anything, including life forms, from scratch, even if they don't exist, just by thinking of them. Similarly, with just a thought, Mxy can also vanish any animal just by thinking about its disappearance. He can also manipulate the Toon Force to aid his abilities. He's also known to show metamorphosis and power distribution along with object and image animation. Mxy can fly almost as fast as Superman thanks to his magical abilities. He can also easily reconstruct molecular structures in anything and everything, so technically, if he wanted to, he could kill Superman in a second. Given his nature, he's also immune to time manipulation. If you learn about the infamous incident known as Emperor Joker, then you'll know that our boy Mxy can easily dominate and destroy the multiverse along with time and space. Even if you rob Mxy of his powers, he would still be indestructible and survive the attacks, which would make him an extremely formidable foe. What weaknesses does Mister Mxyzptlk have? Mxy's a very interesting character, because unlike other villains, whatever weakness that Mxy has, it's because he claimed them to be that. His actions are practically restricted by the boundaries that he put himself in. He's the one who decided that he would go back to the 5th dimension if someone convinced him to spell his name backwards, and he's obligated to follow through with it. Sometimes, Mxyzptlk is referred to as his real name, which is a reverse name. Once he's banished to the 5th dimension, he has a cool-off period of 90 days before he can come back to Earth with all his chaos. Everything that he destroyed while on Earth gets reverted back to its original form once he leaves Earth. This is because he is an imp, and he must pick a weakness. Otherwise, all his trickeries could technically destroy the multiverse. If you had to draw parallels, Mxy would be like Q from Star Trek. He also has an irrational attachment and compulsion towards practical jokes. He is very immature and doesn't take any of the fights seriously. He's always goofing around or playing games. The longer he's on Earth, the more he indulges in impish behavior. How does Mister Mxyzptlk perceive time and space? When it comes to Mister Mxyzptlk, he perceives time and space in a very different way than we do. Since he's a 5th-dimensional being, he is not bound by the constraints that we 3rd-dimensional beings have. His relationship with the concept of space and time is as unique as it can be. The dimensions of time and space are pretty rigid for us, right? Not for Mxy. For him, they're extremely fluid constructs, something that he can twist and turn and even traverse pass through at will. From his perspective, time is not linear at all. He can literally flip through it like we go through the pages of a book. He can go through past, present, and future events at ease in any way, shape, or form he desires. While for us, moments in time are nothing but a figment of our memory, for Mxyzptlk, they're like snapshots that he can easily revisit. I mean, planting a little trick in the past only to watch it unfold 50 years later in the now is not something unachievable by Mxyzptlk. He can easily do it because he can continuously bypass the general time continuity. Thanks to this imp can also easily bypass the effects of causality that you and I cannot. This is why Mister Mxyzptlk could effectively rule the multiverse if he wanted to. I mean, think about it. He sees everything. He knows everything. What's stopping him from simply twisting the history, certain actions a certain way to ensure his ultimate multiverse domination? Well, practically nothing. But Mister Mxyzptlk chooses not to do that simply because he wants to be a prankster, a trickster, and not a world ruler. Just like time is so pliable when it comes to Mister Mxyzptlk, so is space. We see space as this very fixed, three-dimensional plane with physical laws, right? Not Mxyzptlk, though. He sees it as an extension of himself. His will. He can easily shrink vast distances into mere centimeters just by thinking about it. He can show up at multiple places at the same time. He can travel through universes and even turn dimensions into origami. If you've read the comics, you surely know just how infamous he is with his entries in Metropolis. He always shows up in places that have no entry or exit simply because he can. To understand why Mxyzptlk is like this, we have to look at the fifth dimension as a whole. The fifth dimension operates on principles that are beyond the laws of time, space, and nature that we know about. That's why, in this third dimension, Mxyzptlk's powers are godlike. He's simply unbound, and that's why he and other fifth-dimensional beings are such formidable foes for people in the third dimension. What is Mister Mxyzptlk's personality like? Among all the villains our Man of Steel has faced off against, Mister Mxyzptlk has to be the most unconventional one out of them all. He's very mischievous and very chaotic, and given his status as a fifth-dimensional being, he exists beyond the logic and moralities that humans and Kryptonians have. When it comes to Mxyzptlk's personality, deep down, he's someone who just loves amusement. In his eyes, the third dimension is nothing but a playground where he can bring all his ideas to life. While all other humans have greed, malice, or an insatiable lust for power, Mxyzptlk just wants to have fun. Superman, who's the paragon of order and discipline, is the right person to test out his chaos on. That's why he shows up in front of the Man of Steel and creates these elaborate scenarios, baffling and infuriating our Man of Steel. Luckily for us, Mxyzptlk has his self-made rule in place, and if Superman manages to outsmart him, he goes back to the fifth dimension for 90 days. Although at the first meeting, you would think that Mxyzptlk is very zany, truthfully, deep down, he's a very perceptive and intelligent guy. From the way he works the multiverse, twisting and turning it to his wishes, makes it evident that he knows how the multiverse works better than anyone we've seen so far. All the things that he does so by bending the rules of logic, storytelling, and physics, which definitely requires some brain power. That's why when you see his games for the first time, you'll think it's chaotic, when even that chaos is planned to a T. Another huge aspect of Mxyzptlk's personality is his childlike demeanor. The way he loves fun and games, while also having the attention span of a goldfish, is very reminiscent of a child playing with their toy. However, do not let that innocence fool you. Mxyzptlk knows that as a fifth-dimensional being, he has the upper hand over everything in the third dimension, and he's very cocky about it. The air of superiority and the arrogance that Mxyzptlk has often ends up blinding him so much that he doesn't even see his own vulnerabilities, which Superman uses to banish Mxyzptlk back to his dimension time and time again. Is Mister Mxyzptlk dead? What Happened to the Man of Tomorrow is one of the greatest Superman stories to date. In this story, 10 years ago, Superman's secret identity was revealed when villains went after anyone associated with the Man of Steel. Toyman and the Prankster, two very minor villains, managed to learn Superman's identity from Pete Ross. All the villains that Superman has faced off against literally carried out an onslaught against him, and while he did manage to fight them all off, Superman quickly quickly realized that one villain was unaccounted for. It was none other than Mxyzptlk. Turns out, Mxy is now bored of being mischievous, so he decided to become malicious. Now donned in darker color schemes, he was the mastermind behind all the attacks that Superman had to face off against. He revealed his ultimate form to Superman, a huge humanoid purple energy ball. This version of Mxy is darker and grittier than the little man in the purple suit and derby hat that we know him as. In this form, Mxy stalks Superman around his fortress. Lois helped Superman realize the importance of the trophy, which is the Legion of Superheroes. Realizing that, Superman threatened Mxy with the Phantom Zone projector. Seeing that, Mxy hurriedly said his own name backwards to go back to his own dimension. But at the same time, Superman started the Phantom Zone projector. Because of that, Mxy got torn between the two dimensions and ended up dying a cruel death. This marks one of the times that Superman has been killed, and this story puts Mxyzptlk on the map again. Mister Mxyzptlk in other media. Over the years, we've seen Mister Mxyzptlk not just in comic panels, but also on the screen. He first appeared in The New Adventures of Superman. Here he was voiced by Gilbert Mack. While this version followed the official DC Comics pronunciation, the second time we saw him in the Super Friends franchise, his name was pronounced as Mxyzptlk instead. Voiced by Frank Welker, this version of Mxy enjoyed tormenting all the Super Friends, especially when Superman was not around. We see him as a toy in Batman the Animated Series, but he is properly introduced to the DC Animated Universe with Superman the Animated Series. Here he was voiced by Gilbert Gottfried, and his design was inspired by the Golden Age incarnation. He claimed that he inspired the legends of genies, leprechauns, and imps that we hear on Earth. In the Superboy TV show, we see Mister Mxyzptlk played by Michael J. Pollard. He also showed up in Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, and he was played by Howie Mandel. Unlike other incarnations of the character, this version is particularly malevolent. Remember Trent Ford's character in Smallville? Well, this metahuman who can manipulate people just by speaking to them is a character inspired by Mister Mxyzptlk. He is part of a family who can control luck. And of course, how can we forget Peter Gaddio's Mister Mxyzptlk from Superman's second season and Thomas Lennon in the 5th and 6th seasons? Did you know that Mister Mxyzptlk was supposed to appear in Superman 3? Ilya Salkind considered him in his outline, and Dudley Moore was supposed to play the role. However, the idea was scrapped, and we didn't see him on screen. We do see him appear in the Teen Titans Go vs. Teen Titans movie, but over there, he's a prisoner of Trigon and doesn't do much. Marvelous verdict. Whether you can or cannot pronounce his name, you've got to agree that Mister Mxyzptlk is one of the most entertaining Superman villains. His whimsical behavior, his childish pranks, along with his magical ability, make him an extremely infuriating foe. However, once you get past the initial annoyance, you will definitely grow to love this little imp in his purple suit and derby hat. The fact that his main goal is just to annoy Superman every 90 days is absolutely diabolical, and you gotta love him for that. Let me know in the comments what you guys like about Mister Mxyzptlk the most, and I'll see you all the next time. Bye bye, and if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.
Like they'll ever find out.